Welcome to our morning show get-together today. It's our monthly visit with Representative Tony Kurtz, representing the 41st Assembly District. And today, Senator Howard Marklein sits in as well with us. Good to see you gentlemen once again today. Hi, Howard.
Good morning, Phil.
Good
morning,
to have
Phil.
you. Tony, we just saw you at the Race for Grace on Saturday as well, didn't we?
Yeah, it was very nice. Yeah, and the weather was, it was a nice and cool morning. It was perfect for a run and a walk, and it was pretty neat to see all the firefighters and the police and sheriff's department from Richland County out there doing the walk and the run. That was pretty cool.
They were hoofing it.
They were. They did a great job.
Doing a really good job.
Yep.
Howard, I presume you've been busy at community events lately as well.
Yeah, and so on Saturday I was at the Morel Fest parade, and then of course had a good steak dinner at the firehouse after that, and I ran into a number of people from Casanova, Lone Rock, etc., that were involved with the walk in Saturday morning. So it's good to connect with them. So, and decent turnout, I think, for Saturday for the parade in Muscoda. And I don't know if some people remembered the weather a year ago was like in the 90s for that parade, and of course on Saturday it was pretty comfortable, like 65 degrees. I thought, if you're walking in the parade and stuff, it's pretty comfortable. But I remember a year ago eating steaks too at the firehouse, and it was hot in there, with just the heat and all the people at the fire station.
It's been a different spring, that's for sure.
It sure has. Yeah, it's dry. Gosh, we didn't get anything last Thursday. 6 drops maybe is about what we got. In some places, didn't get anything on Thursday. So, yeah, we could use this rain coming up here.
We could. How's it looking in your area? You been planting some corn, Tony?
Well, no, a lot of planting is done, but to Howard's point, we need some moisture. I mean, everything's pretty dry and pretty dusty, and a nice drink would be well welcomed right now. So it looks like we might get about. It looks like it's going to be a good rain from what the forecast looks like. So we'll take it.
That's what we've heard. You guys have been busy. The budget, I guess, is the top story right now. Howard, can you tell us a little bit, fill us in on what's been going on?
Yeah, so a couple weeks ago, 10 days ago, something like that, we completed all of our public hearings around the state. We did 4 of them, and we try to do with these public hearings kind of get to different geographic areas of the state. So we were up in the Green Bay area, in Milwaukee, Hayward, and then in Wausau were the 4 big public hearings. So, and they're pretty long days, obviously, and but to hear a lot of input from people, and then on May 8th, the Joint Finance Committee began the first action. And one of the first things we did was we pulled out all of the policy out of the budget. Okay, this is stuff that marijuana legalization and just all these kinds of things that are policy that should be, I believe, in a separate bill. It shouldn't be tucked into a 1,917-page document that was sitting on our desk from the governor. So we pulled that out, and a lot of those things, and there's some things in there that I like, like the milk labeling. Milk should come from a cow. That's something that I support. Well, we didn't cherry pick. We pulled out the stuff that I supported as well. So, and then we also adopted the what are called standard budget adjustments. These are the normal increases, the re-estimates, debt service, for example. We have no, it's not discretionary as whether or not you're going to pay your debt, your bond payments and all that. So we fine-tuned all that. So, and then there were a number of agencies that basically, after the standard budget adjustments were made, that we were able to close those out. So anyway, so now we got our fiscal updated fiscal bureau estimates last Thursday. And so now that we know kind of where we're at financially, we can probably get to work here over the next probably 4 or 5 weeks and get going on the budget. Really, in terms of the real substantive areas, and get going.
So there are some things you agree with in it, though, right? in the budget in terms of some things that you'd like to see?
Well, yeah, I mean, hopeful, our goal, at least my goal, is that we can pass a budget that we support and that the governor will sign. I mean, that's the goal, I think, and also time frame wise, I hope we get this thing done before the end of June, which is when the fiscal year ends. And however, and if it doesn't happen, we're not like the federal government. So if it's not done till July 2nd, nothing shuts down. With the state of Wisconsin, your budget continues on at base level until the next budget is passed. So it isn't like people at the prison in basketball aren't going to get paid or whatever. Or school districts aren't going to get state aids. I mean, all this stuff continues at base level until the next budget is passed. So, having said that, I would sure love to get this thing done though, well before the end of the fiscal year.
Tony?
No, like Howard said, we did our 4 listening sessions around the state. We also individually we did listening sessions in our own area, and so we've heard a lot of good feedback. And as far as the assembly, we're doing our spring surveys right now, so we're going to get that back as well. Matter of fact, I've already got a bunch of those already in the office, and I appreciate folks filling those out. So those are all the different information we will use as we craft the budget. But to Howard's point, some of those things that we go back to base budget, and we've done that for the last 3 budgets, and this is not something new. They actually did this when Governor Walker was in office. They went back to a base budget then, so this is something that historically the Joint Finance Committee has done. And to Howard's point, there were some things that was we're going to talk about some EMS bills that Howard and I have introduced, and we've had some good hearings on, but some of that sort of a version of that was in the governor's budget. Well, we're running bills, and that's something that we both agree on, that if it's such a good idea, then run a bill and then have it eventually signed by the governor. And so those are the type of things we will do over the next several months as we craft and finish the state budget.
Do you hear a lot about school funding when you're out and about at functions such as the one we saw you at on Saturday?
I've heard, I hear a lot of different things. Obviously, school funding was something that we always hear, particularly special education. And I fully admit we as a state need to do a better job on that. And I hope as we do with the state budget, we do better on special ed. But I will say, still hearing a lot of things, concerns at the federal level, and just to make sure I reiterate, that's something that Senator Marklein and I, we talked to our congressional delegation quite a bit. We give them input, but right now there's a lot of unknowns. I think we need to just be a little bit more patient, because there's a lot of different ideas and opinions being promoted on Facebook, etc., and other platforms. We, Howard and I, can't react to that, and because let's see what at the end of the day what actually happens. I think it's going to be far less than what people have articulated. You get, I don't want to say it's fear-mongering, but my humble opinion, it is a little bit of fear-mongering. But right now, we just have to be very patient. But like I said, our goal is to do a very good budget like we've had the last several years, and it's something that we invest in our priorities. Schools will be one of those. Infrastructure will be another one. Our health care, our nursing homes, all these things that are so important, particularly for our area, especially with an aging population.
Or did you want to comment on that?
Yeah, and I did want to mention, last Thursday we did get the updated nonpartisan legislative fiscal bureau estimates for what the expected tax collections are going to be over the next couple of years. So, and over a 3-year period, the expected collections are down about $335 million. So, which is, it's not insignificant. And I was expecting somewhat of a decline anyway. So, and what I've been kind of sharing with a lot of people is, there's this headline, billions of dollars of surplus. Well, we need to be cautious, because our cost to continue which largely is Medicaid, is like $1.8 billion of cost to continue. That's doing nothing. That's got to come out of there kind of first. So anyway, so as we go into the next budget, I think we need to be a little bit cautious in terms of just the overall approach to the budget. And we got resources, but it's not nearly as much as what I think kind of the headline number is. And and obviously one of the things that I hear from people as Tony Kurtz does about various requests. And what I tell people often is that in isolation, your request is very appropriate. And the key thing there is in isolation. If your request for X funding is the only thing that we had to worry about, but the thing is we have to worry about everything. We have to worry about the totality of the budget, so and impact to the state. So and that's where it's a matter of weighing various priorities. So anyway, we got the numbers from the Fiscal Bureau last Thursday are they're not bad. They're sometimes in the past on the May 15th is always in an odd numbered year is always when we get these updated numbers. And for finance geeks like us, we wait for that day to kind of see where we're at. And many years we've had bumps, where tax collections were higher than what they had expected, and it's good news. And now we got an extra, X $100 million to fund things. So this time it went the other way, and again, it wasn't unexpected. We'd been kind of expecting this, and a bit. I tracked the tax collections month by month as they come in, and it wasn't a shock.
Mm-hmm. April had a few snafus too, didn't it, in terms of mail and different things that were going on?
Yeah, it was interesting. So the month of April is a big deal for the Department of Revenue, because that is obviously April 15th is when people file their tax returns, and the money coming out of people's paychecks like every week or every 2 weeks, that's pretty predictable. Okay, it's fairly stable and stuff. But people's, what they end up paying or the refunds they get on April 15th, there can be big swings in that based on the stock market, capital gains and that sort of thing. So now this year, the one thing that happened was, and actually it was a couple things, but with the income taxes, the income taxes, the tax returns that were due April 15th were mailed to Madison, okay? And there was a Postal Service sorter issue, so all those tax returns got sent by mistake to Milwaukee, and then it took Milwaukee Postal Service some time to send them back to Madison. And then apparently what they do is they separate the checks from the tax returns, and then the checks get sent back to Milwaukee. So there was a lot of these checks and tax returns that came in originally about April 15th or close to it, but they never got cleared until in May. So that amounted to $230 million, which is not insignificant. That's 1 month, So anyway, so the April individual tax collections were down over 9% compared to the prior year, which, again, the headline is like, that's a pretty substantial drop. But when you start looking at some of the details in it, it can be explained, So sales tax for the month of April was up 4%. However, what was interesting in that is that there was a significant increase in auto sales in the month of April, about 13% increase in auto sales, which they believe is largely tariff driven, that people want to, people that may have waited till June, July to buy a car worried about tariffs, so price increases, so they were purchasing them in April, and I've heard that from some of the local dealers as well. So anyway, that 4% sales tax increase in the month of April is not sustainable. It's not, we can't forecast that out because those are sales that we normally would have in the next month or two down the road.
Tony, you talked a little bit about some, people talking online and, fear and those kind of things. One of the things that has come up lately is cuts to badger care. Mm-hmm. Have you heard much about that, or is that something you looked at?
We've looked at that, and we've talked a lot about, once again, to our congressional. I talked to Congressman Van Orten at least 3 times last week. And once again, I just want to caution people, let's just wait and see. I think they're well aware of, especially the need of badger care in our area, because we have a large, once again, Richland County, Juneau County, all in excess with Medicaid, all within excess of 26, 27%, 28% for Juneau County receive Medicaid through those counties. So I understand how important that is to so many people, and that's something we are watching. But once again, the devils are going to be in the details once they get done with something at the federal level. I have not seen that, but I know that's something we do talk about, and we do look at that. And as far as back to, I do want to emphasize something Howard talked about, the cost to continue. And when we do all those listening sessions, there's approximately $6 billion worth of asks out there. So all these great ideas, and to Howard's point, there are a lot of really good ideas, but the problem is we only have X number of dollars. And I know everybody sees that the state has the $4 billion surplus, but I want to emphasize that is like the vast majority of that money's one-time money. And the way I like to articulate this to people is, remember during the years of COVID, a lot of individuals in our area got stimulus checks. The county got money, the school districts got money, the townships got money, the cities got money. Everybody got these large payments. Well, for the vast majority, that was one time. And to Howard's point, when you look at tax collections, sales tax collections during that time, like in 2021, the sales tax collection was 9.6%. That's more than double what it normally is. In 2002, it was 9.2%. In 2023, it was 6.8%. In 24, it was like more normal, down in the 4% range. But my point is, during those years, those peak years of COVID, when all this cash was coming in from the federal government, people spent that money. And we as a state collected that money through the sales tax and certain extents of the income tax. And that's how we kind of built this large one-time money. But moving forward, when you talk about the cost to continue, so what's one example of the cost to continue? Well, remember last session we did a shared revenue bill. Part of that shared revenue was a 1%. You would get the sales, whatever the state sales tax increase rate, the municipalities would also share in that. Well, that's a $68 million addition to our cost to continue, and that's something that now we build into our base budget. And that's why Howard's point, we got to be just really careful on how we build things into the base budget, that we don't build it in. We build it in the base. That's something we're responsible for heading, into the future. And so we just got to be very cautious about this budget, but also future budgets.
Anything else you'd like to add, Howard?
No, just to follow up on the one-time, surplus and stuff. Again, when people, schools, for example, hey, you got this big surplus, just send, give us more money. And, I asked them, so you want one-time money then? No, we want this, not just this year, next year, but, well into the future. So, again, that's where, the last budget, we had a similar situation in the last budget where we had quite a bit of one-time money. And, we funded ongoing commitments, and strategically, we when it came to new building construction, for example, on campuses and that sort of thing, instead of borrowing money, which we normally do in bonding for those buildings, we paid cash. Also, the last time we paid down debt. We paid down about $480 million of debt, which has an impact, into the future because we don't have that interest expense, to pay now well into the future. So, that's examples of what we did last budget, and there's a chance that we may use similar techniques, I think, this year, with the budget. So we're not, again, as Tony said, we're not committing ourselves to ongoing expenses into the future that, we may not have the resources.
We've talked a lot about in this program about public school funding, but the other thing in the headlines today was higher education funding, and certainly there's a big ask for that for the coming year too, right?
Yes, I think they're looking at $885 million, I think is what President Jay Rothman is asking, and so, I'm not going to, I can't make any comments into whether or not we're going to make what kind of funding we're going to have for the UW. So one of the challenges we have at both the K-12 level and at the university level is just a demographic issue, and that is just fewer and fewer students, which we see it out here obviously with the in our K-12 districts. I mean, there are very few districts. I think I'm only aware of one district in my Senate district that has growing enrollment. That's in Oregon, which is basically suburban Madison. Other than that, it's the enrollment is declining. That ripple effect is making its way through to higher education and to the university. And I know Jay Rothman is aware of this. It's a challenge, and there's just going to be a lot fewer students going into the UW system into the future. So, and again, that's something that it's a challenge for Jay Rothman. He's aware of it. He's a smart guy. And so, I'm sure that those are all things we'll be weighing too as a budget committee.
Mm-hmm. Did you want to add anything, Tony?
Well, I know we've talked about this before on this program, just to Howard's point about the demographics. In the 60s, when I was born, the birth rate was 25 babies for every 1,000 people per year. That birth rate now is 10 babies for every 1,000 people for every 1 year. So it is just drastically dropped, and you see that in our numbers, especially when you talk about K-12. There's roughly 40,000 less students today than there was even 8 years ago in our K-12, and so when you look at it, like I think I mentioned before on this program, like in 2026 will be our lowest graduating class. When you look at high school graduation rates, I have 18 school districts in just that my assembly seat touches, and Adams Friendship, which is obviously in Adams County, which is the northern part of my district. I mean, they've lost over 200 students in the last 10 years. Now, once again, I want to make sure I articulate this. This isn't people moving out. It's just simply we do not have the birth rates. We got the graduating classes, but we don't have those kindergartens coming back up, and that is throughout our district. To Howard's point, the only district of mine that's actually growing is the Dells, Wisconsin Dells. Everybody else, unfortunately, is declining. And I think when you look at the UW, the one thing that does frustrate me about the UW, what I believe the vast majority of in our state and our listening area have no idea about, is UW is our largest employer of the state. There's roughly 72,000 state employees. Some of that paid with federal money and state money, but UW has 37,000 of those employees. And so I find it a little bit interesting when, for instance, Platteville several years ago, I give the chancellor a lot of credit because they had a 25% decrease in enrollment numbers, but yet they had a 56% increase in administrative staff. And so they had to make some hard choices. They did some layoffs. They did some, people that were retiring, but the news said that due to budget cuts, they were laying people off. If you ever talk to the chancellor down there, she will say, I needed to right-size the ship based on the number of students that I had. And it's interesting, Green Bay, University of Wisconsin and Green Bay did the same thing. Oshkosh did the same thing. And I personally think a lot of our campuses, particularly, to be fair, Madison needs to do the same thing, because I think over the years we've gotten a lot of administrative bloat, I hate to say. And I think we need to kind of retool and say, okay, do we need all these positions? And I will say this. One thing about the governor's budget, and once again, I know we went back to base, but what does not get articulated in the media, unfortunately, is the governor's budget would have increased our state increased spending by 21%. We would have increased staff by 1,300 positions. So I asked many of my friends and neighbors around the area, did you get a 21% increase? Do we really need all that additional staff? And so that's why one of the reasons why we go back to base and we build from the base that, a base budget that we all agree on. And so that's something I think we need to do a better job about, is saying, let's get back to some basics, because UW does a great job. My daughter is finishing school there, and they're a wonderful university. It's just, I do think there's a little bit of things that we need to take a look at when you talk about administrative bloat, especially at some of the bigger campuses.
Representative Kurtz and Senator Marklein on our morning show today. We'll be back after these words on the morning show. Representative Tony Kurtz, Senator Howard Marklein on our morning show today in the studios. We wanted to talk a lot about some things coming up here, and I know one of the things we wanted to talk about, Howard, was a resolution for David Martin.
So we were on the Senate was on the floor last week, and one of the things that we did was pass a resolution recognizing David Martin, who passed away recently. And David Martin was a state representative up in the Neenah, Menasha area years ago. I want to say maybe in the 60s for quite a period of time. Had a pretty distinguished career in the state assembly. But then we retired to Muscatine, and where he became quite active in the communities on the Lower Wisconsin State Riverway Board, Three Eagles Foundation, Muscatine Chamber, Southwest Tech Board. So anyway, very active in the community, and I saw him at a lot of different community meetings and events that I went to. So anyway, we're happy to have recognized David Martin not only for his service in the state assembly many years ago, but also for his service in the Muscatine area.
I know, too. Tony, you wanted to talk about rural EMS. That's always a topic in your area.
It's National EMS Week.
Yeah.
So that's a very appropriate thing. But no, this, as you know, EMS is so critical for our area, and it's been under a lot of strain lately. And it's been not only, and it's something I give Senator Marklein a lot of credit. He's been working on this for years. And when I was fortunate to get elected, I know we've both been working on it together. But yes, we introduced 3 additional EMS bills. When Howard and I testified about a month ago on these bills, one of the things I said is, I already talked about the shared revenue bill, but part of the shared revenue bill was a thing called funding assistance program. That funding assistance program went from $2.2 million up to $25 million. And that kind of helped a lot of EMS providers, including all the ones in our area like CAS and Richland Center. But these bills will continue to do that. Right now, one of the bills is when an EMS provider goes out to a scene and they may treat somebody, or they may go to your home and treat you on scene, but they don't transport you, a lot of time they actually can't get reimbursed for that. And so we have one piece of legislation that will allow them to get reimbursed for that at a little higher rate. And that will help a lot of providers. One of the other ones is through the technical colleges. Like right now, let's say Southwest Tech has a EMS class. They put on some courses, and they don't fill the class. Unfortunately, a lot of times they'll cancel the course. Well, that hurts 5 or 6 people that were going to take the class. That's going to help our rural areas. Right now, the other bill would actually pay for those other slots and actually open them up to other parts of the state. And so if they don't fill a class, we're going to make sure they still hold that class. That was something several years ago. You may remember Senator Marklein and I, along with Travis Tranel and Todd Novak, did a series of EMS listening sessions around the entire district, and that's one of the things that came out about how some of the courses were canceled because the classes weren't filled. And then the other bill would allow, instead of having EMS on like a county-wide, you would have more of a regional, so you could go across county lines, and that will also help with the levy limits and everything like that, provide more funding for EMS providers.
Indeed. Very important for our area, Howard. And, we're fortunate that when we call 911, somebody responds. I think there are some places in the state where that doesn't happen.
Yeah. And, and again, we take it for granted. We just assume that when we call 911, somebody is going to show up. And, in our rural areas, especially during the daytime, when people are at jobs and working and stuff, it's, staffing is a big issue. So on a lot of these issues in these three bills really relate to staffing and trying to make it a little bit easier. And one of those bills, too, that would provide some financial assistance to people when they take these courses, whether it's funded by the agency, whether it's funded by local fire EMS unit, or whether the person takes it themselves, will provide some funding for that too. So, and then the other thing I guess I did want to mention was the hours and the scope of service and all that. And it's incredibly. In fact, I hear that's one of the things I hear about from rural EMS people, and I heard it on Saturday night in Muscadet. What's going on with the hours, Howard? And what ends up happening is the state Department of Health Services increases the training hours by 40 hours, okay? And the more hours they add to training for our volunteers, the fewer people we get. So in this bill, it would require the EMS board to send a report to the legislature on what is your rationale for increasing these hours? Because right now there tends to be they're pointing at each other. Well, the national scope of service says this, or the state scope of practice says this. We want to know what is driving this, because again, I can go to any of my rural areas and and if the hours increase is appropriate, no problem. But I think often these increases in the hours of training are more oriented towards the Madisons, the Janesvilles, the Milwaukees, which may be wonderful there, but it doesn't affect, or it doesn't really or has an adverse effect on places like Muscadet and Blue River and our rural areas. So we need to be sensitive. They need to be sensitive to that. And right now, nobody is really, they're not telling anybody really what's the rationale for these increases in hours of training.
Nurses, too. We're very thankful to have the nurses that we do, too.
Absolutely. So over the last 13 years, there's been it's called the Advanced Practice Registered Nurse Modernization Act, and it's something basically allowing those type of nurse practitioners. These are your certified registered nurse anesthetists that obviously work right here in our wonderful Richland Hospital. You got certified midwives, nurse practitioners, and clinical nurse specialists. These are nurses that have gone back to school, that are on the top of their game, and basically this bill would allow them to practice at their full scope of their clinical skills. And unfortunately, over the last several years, the bill has gone to the governor's office desk twice. Those, unfortunately, have been vetoed. This session, we've worked very hard and I know this is going to shock people, but in a very bipartisan way. We've met with the governor's office. I can't tell you how many different times we've met with their office to come up with an agreement, and we finally have an agreement. We had the first hearing last week in the health committee. They're going to that in the Health Committee and the Assembly this week, and I'm pretty confident it's going to be a unanimous ballot. But basically, once again, this just is a really good thing for our rural healthcare, especially all our critical access hospitals in the area, to let our wonderful nurses that are working so hard and so diligently, but those that are at the top of their game, the top of their skill set, to work at their full practice authority. And I think it's something that's going to be very good for rural communities.
NFL draft recently wrapped up, Howard. That was big for Wisconsin, wasn't it?
It sure was. And I didn't make it up there. I'm kind of glad after I saw the photos and stuff, I'm kind of glad I didn't. But, it had a big impact on just shining the spotlight on the state of Wisconsin. It was, it's like kind of having one of these big golf tournaments and that kind of thing. It's kind of neat to have the national and international spotlight shine on Wisconsin. But I was, interested in this too, not just from as a football fan, but also from the economic impact. And we don't have the final numbers yet. Or if they're out there, I haven't seen them yet. I think it'll be another month or so till we get what the final numbers are. But it was projected that there would be a $94 million impact to the state of Wisconsin. Okay, all of that, and that's hotels, that's restaurants, food. A couple of people probably drank some beer during that time. But all of that's subject to the 5% sales tax. So why do we care here in Richland County or Grant County or Iowa County? Well, obviously, as Tony talked earlier, 1 penny of that comes back to our shared through the shared revenue formula. So again, we may not, non-football fans may not care at all about that event in Green Bay, but it had a big impact and will have a big impact on our shared revenue that trickles down throughout the state of Wisconsin. And again, as one of and Tony was front and center when that shared revenue bill was negotiated almost 2 years ago now. And so when there's events, I mentioned a golf tournament in Kohler or the Brewers or whoever, any event anywhere in the state of Wisconsin, we should be cheering them on, because I don't care whether it's a snowmobile event in northern Wisconsin or any event in the state of Wisconsin has a positive impact on the entire state. So again, we're grateful to have the NFL draft here last month, and from what I hear from the people that went, said it was a wonderful event, and I'm glad that our local communities here will benefit to some extent in the future.
Most definitely. This is another thing from the headlines today. I just wanted to get your take on this. It was from the Republican Party of Wisconsin from this past weekend, but they're talking about squabbling within the party. We always talk about squabbling across the party lines, but what's your take on that, Tony? Is there a lot of dissension in the Republican Party these days?
I think it's I would say no. I mean, I think the discussion is you have different philosophies, you have different approaches on how to achieve certain objectives. It doesn't matter if it's Republicans and Democrats, but you also have varying views in the Republican Party on how you want to achieve certain things, just as you do in the Democrat Party. You see that too, about how you have different things that they may disagree on. I don't necessarily call it a squabble. I think it's a good. They aired out a lot of frustrations, a lot of internal things that they've talked about over the last several months. I think there's a little bit of reflection on the Supreme Court race. That was something that obviously as Republicans we were a little upset about, and how do we do better in spring elections and things like that. But I don't think it's a massive rift. I actually think it was worse a couple years ago than it is now. I think it's actually a lot better now than it was a couple years ago.
Howard, what's your take on that?
I didn't attend the convention in this weekend, so I don't know any more than probably what's in the media. So, when I attend local GOP party functions and that sort of thing, again, I don't sense that. And I've been to a lot of Lincoln Day dinners and that sort of thing over the last few months, so I don't feel that there's a whole lot of dissension, and obviously, in any group, not everybody agrees, on anything. I don't care. You can go to church, in a church committee, people don't always agree on things. So, and I, to some extent, I guess if there's some differences, maybe that may not all be bad. It's sometimes good to have, everybody's thinking identically, as one of my former partners in our CPA firm told me many, many years ago. He said, if we agree on everything, then probably one of us isn't needed here. Which I think is, it's true. Sometimes it's good to have different perspectives. So anyway, I don't really have much more to add in that.
Tony?
No, I do want to. Howard makes a very important point about the fact that people need to talk. And it doesn't matter, Republicans sitting down at the table together versus, Democrats sitting down at the table, or like I mentioned about the bill, the APRN bill that we did with the governor's office and other stakeholders. And that is a point where we sat around the table and said, okay, why has this failed over the last 13 years, and what can we do better? Because we sat down at the table, we aired our grievances, and I think it's much better to do that than, legislating on Facebook or Twitter or whatever social platform you're on. When you get around a table, you can actually get a good product done. And so obviously those individuals, and like I said, to Howard's point, I didn't go this weekend either. I was too busy sitting on a tractor and trying to get some crops planted. But the fact of the matter is that we're talking, that both sides are talking, especially when we're in Madison, is a good thing. And it's something. It's interesting, on Saturday when I'm at that wonderful event, the Run for Grace, people want us to work together. They want us to solve problems. And it's interesting, solving problems sometimes is not easy, and you have to talk, you have to have a disagreement, and then finally say what's better for the greater good of the state. And I think that's where we're at right now. I'm actually pleasantly surprised about the direction we're going right now. I think we're heading the right direction. We got a lot of work to do, but I feel very good about where we're at.
We're into state park season too. I know you're a big proponent of your state parks, the state parks in Wisconsin that we have.
Yes, and it's the 125th anniversary of our state park system. Oh. I have more state parks in my Senate district than any other senator. So, it's just a wonderful treasure that we have. And so, and I've been, since I've been on Joint Finance Committee, been a strong advocate for, for our parks, and especially the, kind of restructuring our camping fees. When I got on Joint Finance, and my family, we go camping every year. It's a family tradition. So, when I got on Joint Finance, and we typically go up to Peninsula State Park, and we were paying $15 a night for our camping. It's Peninsula State Park. The campsite next to me was occupied by somebody from Illinois. They were paying $17 a night. $2 more. Meanwhile, state taxpayers were subsidizing my camping fees to the tune of about 25%. And at Peninsula State Park, you could not get, they're full, absolutely packed. And the way it works is we have to make reservations 11 months to the day at 9 a.m. and by 9:03, every campsite's gone. Okay. Now, if you're in the private sector, you run a restaurant, let's say, okay, and you've got people lined up down the street, around the block to get in your restaurant, and they can't get in, what do? You raise the fees a bit. And so we've got basically 4 very, very, very popular state parks for camping. And so what we did over a number of years is we permitted the Department of Natural Resources to increase the fees, on some of those high demand. Again, up in Peninsula State Park, for example, Devil's Lake's another one in our area here. That's it's packed. I mean, it's a very popular. So we've been able, and they've done that, and you know what's happened? They're full. They're still full, and and it's generated millions and millions of dollars of revenue, which we've been able to plow back into those park systems and those parks, whether it's upgrading their water treatment systems, their water systems, campsites, and all that. So so I'm happy with the strategy that we've implemented over the last number of years. I was at Governor Dodge a week or so ago chatting with the folks over there. They're busy. They told me, I think it was over Mother's Day weekend, that 50% of their campers and visitors are from out of state. Okay, so the non-residents are paying a premium to come here, but you know what? It doesn't stop them at all. It's probably the cheapest part of their whole trip is the camping fee that they pay. So again, it's 125th anniversary. Congratulations to our parks. Again, we've got a lot of them around here, and I encourage people to get out and enjoy the parks. Also, I mentioned the high demand parks, like Governor Dodge is one of them, Peninsula, Devil's Lake. We've got a lot of less popular ones. Yellowstone, for example. Those, we kept the rates low, the camping fees low. So for families that are on a budget, and there are a lot of people that can't pay the premium to go to a Devil's Lake, there are a lot of affordable options for them. And so we've got to recognize that in structuring the fees. And but I'm looking forward to getting camping here in a few weeks. Hopefully it's a little warmer than what it is today.
'Tis the season. Tony, anything else you wanted to add today?
Well, and just to piggyback on that, that's something, as we look at this state budget, we have the Knowles-Nelson stewardship. That's something I think we're going to work very diligently hard on to get reauthorized, but also focusing on maintaining and improving a lot of our wonderful parks and trails that we have in the state. We're very fortunate. We just need to make sure we keep those up to snuff in the best possible condition we can. So
today is National Elected Officials Day as well, so thanks for what you guys do.
I can't believe
there you go.
There's a day for that, huh?
National, yeah.
Well, thank you, Phil.
You bet.
Wonderful listeners.
Good to have you. Representative Tony Kurtz, Senator Howard Marklein. Tony, you'll be back next month, and Howard, you'll be back sometime this summer, it sounds like.
I will.
So, all right. Sounds good. We'll have more coming up tomorrow on The Morning Show.